Tessa Zimmerman was 3 sips into a lukewarm gas station coffee when her boss dropped the biggest project of her career into her lap without warning, without prep, and with a deadline that made her stomach twist. "I need a full campaign pitch by Monday morning," her boss, Miranda, said, not looking up from her tablet. "And it has to be unforgettable. This one's for a high-profile luxury client, don't ask who, it's confidential." Tessa blinked. "Monday, that's 3 days." Miranda finally looked up. "You want out," Tessa straightened. "No, I'll do it." She always did. That's what got her hired as the youngest creative lead at Stride Marketing. And even though she was still paying off student loans and living in a tiny Chicago studio with an oven that didn't work, she wasn't about to let an opportunity like this slip past her. By that night, she was sketching out concepts with her cat snoring beside her. Luxury, but real. Timeless, but bold. Tessa didn't know who the client was, but she knew what good branding felt like a gut punch, like falling in love at first sight. She built the pitch around a concept called Elegance Unfiltered, a lens on authentic luxury, stripping away the fake gloss. She designed sleek visuals, wrote bold copy, and built a whole story around the idea of power without pretense. What she didn't know was that the man who would be reviewing her work was the billionaire owner of the luxury empire. She was unknowingly branding, and that her words were about to hit him like a lightning strike. Across the city, in a penthouse that overlooked the river, Orion Fletcher sat at a glass conference table with his sleeves rolled up, flipping through pitch decks from agencies desperate to rebrand his high-end lifestyle brand, Fletcher & Co. He barely glanced at half of them. Too obvious. Too stiff. Too fake. Then his assistant dropped a new folder in front of him. "This one's from Stride, I think you'll like it." Orion almost didn't open it until he saw the first page, Elegance Unfiltered. He leaned back in his chair, surprised. He kept reading. The tone was sharp, confident. Honest. The visuals were clean, powerful, but it was the way the words flowed that caught him. They weren't trying to impress him. They weren't fake. They felt real, like someone had written them from the gut. "Who wrote this?" he asked, eyes narrowing. The assistant checked the credits. "Tessa Zimmerman, creative lead." Orion tapped the edge of the folder, thinking, "Set a meeting with Stride next week." Tessa walked into the Fletcher & Co. building the following Thursday, not knowing the man she was about to present to own the entire company and that her life was about to flip upside down. She wore the only decent blazer she had, paired with black jeans and ankle boots that pinched. Miranda and 2 others from the agency were already there, but it was Tessa who would be presenting. The conference room was sleek and intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors. And one man at the head of the table, tall, dark-haired, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than her rent. "You're not mid-level," she muttered under her breath before realizing she'd said it out loud. The man raised a brow. "Excuse me?" Tessa flushed. "Sorry. I thought we were presenting to a creative director." "I own the company," he said, voice calm. "Orion Fletcher." Her throat tightened. "Oh," he gestured to the screen. "Let's see what you've got, Miss Zimmerman." She took a breath and started. And to her surprise, he didn't interrupt once. He watched her with sharp eyes, arms crossed, but his expression wasn't bored or annoyed. He looked intrigued, like he was trying to figure her out. When she finished, there was a long pause. Then Orion stood. "Clear the room," her boss blinked. "Excuse me, I want to speak to Miss Zimmerman alone." Tessa froze. Miranda looked ready to faint but nodded. The room cleared. Now it was just the 2 of them. Orion turned to face her fully. "Where did you come up with this concept?" She swallowed. "I guess. I was tired of everything feeling fake. I wanted to show that real power doesn't need to scream." He stepped closer. "You wrote that line, luxury isn't about being seen, it's about being undeniable." Tessa nodded slowly. "Yeah," he studied her. "It's good, thank you. I mean, it's really good," she blinked. "I appreciate that." Orion's gaze didn't waver. "Do you know how rare that is? Most people try too hard. You didn't. You just said something real." Tessa shifted under his stare. "I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I didn't even know who the client was, he smiled. And that's exactly why it worked, she nodded, unsure what to say. The room felt too quiet, too intense. Then he asked, "Do you have plans tonight?" Her mouth parted. "I what?" "I'd like to continue this conversation." "Over dinner?" Her eyes widened. "Like, dinner," he laughed softly. "Yes, dinner, I don't even know you." "You know my brand," he said. "That's more than most people," she hesitated. "This isn't some test or something?" "No," his voice softened. "It's just dinner." Tessa looked at him, heart racing. Everything about him screamed powerful and dangerous, but not in a bad way. In a way that made her feel like the floor wasn't quite steady beneath her feet. Finally, she said, "Okay." Dinner? 2 hours later, she was stepping out of a sleek black car in front of a restaurant with no name on the door, just a valet in a tuxedo and an entrance that looked like it led into another universe. The host greeted Orion with a nod and led them to a private table on a rooftop with glowing lanterns and a view of the city skyline. "This is insane," she whispered. He looked at her. "You don't like it?" "No, I love it." I've never been anywhere like this before." He leaned in a little. "Then I'm glad I got to be the first." She met his eyes, and for a second the world narrowed to just them. Dinner was easy, too easy. He asked about her childhood, her art, her favorite movies. She made him laugh when she told him about the time she accidentally sent a pitch deck with cat memes to a client. He told her about growing up in Boston, building Fletcher & Co. from scratch, and how he hated most of the people in his own industry. By the end of the night, Tessa didn't want it to end. Outside, he opened the car door for her. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not being what I thought you'd be." Orion looked at her. "You thought I'd be a jerk." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to," she smiled. "Okay, maybe a little." He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I like being underestimated." Her breath caught. He didn't kiss her, not yet, but he looked at her like he wanted to, and Tessa. She wasn't sure if she was floating or falling. But she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't walking away from this story anytime soon. The next morning, Tessa barely made it to her desk before Miranda cornered her with a look that could slice steel. "You stayed after the meeting," Miranda said in a low tone, arms crossed. Tessa set her coffee down carefully. "Mr. Fletcher asked to speak with me privately." Miranda narrowed her eyes. "And then we talked." "That's it." Tessa kept her tone even, though her heart was still tangled in the memory of last night's rooftop dinner, the way Orion had leaned in so close the city lights had blurred behind him. Miranda tapped a stack of folders on Tessa's desk. "Whatever that was, keep it separate. We're professionals, we don't get distracted." "I'm not distracted," Tessa said, even though she hadn't slept more than 4 hours. After Miranda left, Tessa opened her inbox. At the top was a calendar invite from Orion's assistant for a follow-up creative session. 1 hour. Private suite at the Fletcher & Co. headquarters. She stared at it for a full minute before accepting. When she arrived, the assistant led her past the executive floor and into a sunlit room that looked more like a gallery than a workspace. Polished wood floors, sculptural lighting. And Orion, seated near a table strewn with vintage brand books and hand-drawn concept sketches. "I thought we'd work somewhere less sterile today," he said without looking up. Tessa set her bag down. "Did you draw these?" "I did. A long time ago, before Fletcher & Co." "Became Fletcher & Co." She stepped closer, eyes scanning the sketches. "You used to design your own pieces?" "I still do," she turned to him. "You're not what I expected." "I like that about you," he said, not missing a beat. "You don't filter your reactions." Tessa crossed her arms. "So why am I here, really?" Orion leaned back, folding his hands. "Because your pitch wasn't branding, it was storytelling, and I want to see what you can do when you're not answering to a committee." She hesitated. "You want me to freelance?" "No," he said. "I want to commission you personally. One campaign, full creative control, you'll be working with me directly." Tessa blinked. "That sounds like a conflict of interest. I'm not asking Stride, I'm asking you. They'll never agree to that." "I'll make it worth their while," he said. "And yours." She took a slow breath. "You don't even know me." "I know what I saw in your work, and I know I want to see more." Tessa studied him, trying to read beyond the tailored suit and calm confidence. "What's the real reason you want me on this?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because I've built a brand that sells perfection, but perfection doesn't move people, you do." The room felt too quiet again, like the air was bending around something unspoken. Tessa finally sat across from him. "Okay, I'll do it," Orion nodded once. "Good. We start now." They worked for hours brainstorming, sketching, arguing over fonts and phrasing. At one point, Tessa stood up and said, "You can't keep using serif typefaces for everything. It's aggressive." "You think that word describes me?" he asked, amused. "I think you've built an empire around control." "And you think that's a bad thing?" "I think it's lonely," she said before she could stop herself. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. "I didn't used to be." She looked at him, surprised by the honesty. "What happened?" "My mother died when I was 22. She built the first version of Fletcher & Co. out of a rented studio. I was supposed to study architecture. Instead, I took everything she left and rebuilt the brand from the ground up." Tessa didn't speak. "She believed in beauty," he went on, "not excess. She taught me that luxury should mean something, but somewhere along the way I started chasing scale instead of meaning." Tessa's voice softened. "And now I want to remember what it felt like to create something real." She held his gaze. "Then stop designing for people you'll never meet." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "That's why I need you. You write like you're speaking to one person. It's intimate, human." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he stood. "Come with me." "Where?" He didn't answer. He just picked up his phone, said a name to his assistant, and motioned toward the hall. 30 minutes later, they were stepping into a private showroom that looked like a museum exhibit: glass cases, curated lighting, and dozens of pieces from every Fletcher & Co. collection since its founding. "I keep this off limits to the public," he said, unlocking one of the cases. Tessa moved closer. "Why?" "Because it reminds me of who I was before the board meetings and quarterly reports." He pulled out a small leather clutch, simple, elegant, hand-stitched. "My mother made this," he said. It was the last piece she ever touched. Tessa reached out, then stopped herself. "May I?" He nodded. She picked it up gently, running her fingers along the edge. "It's beautiful. It feels personal." Orion met her eyes. "So do you." She froze. He didn't move closer, didn't push. Just watched her like he was waiting for her to decide what came next. Tessa set the clutch down carefully. "I think we should keep working." He nodded once, but his eyes didn't flick away. That night, when she got home, she found a package waiting outside her door, no note. Just a black box tied with a silk ribbon. Inside was a pen, sleek, silver, engraved with her initials. She held it in her palm for a long time, heart thudding. Then she opened her notebook and wrote one sentence: "He's not what I expected, and neither is this." Tessa adjusted the strap of her bag as she stepped out of the elevator into the top floor of the Fletcher & Co. headquarters, greeted not by the usual assistant, but by Orion himself. "I thought we were meeting in the creative suite," she said, glancing around the more formal executive level. "We were. Change of plans." He gestured for her to follow. "Boardroom's booked, and I need your opinion on something." She hesitated for a beat before trailing behind him through a set of double glass doors. Instead of the usual sterile boardroom setup, she walked into a space that looked like a high-end event staging area. A long table was set with fabric samples, lighting mock-ups, and a series of digital screens showing rotating images of a new campaign direction. At the center of the chaos was a single word: legacy. "I didn't approve this direction," Tessa said, scanning the visuals. "This isn't the story we're telling." "I know," Orion replied, already pulling a remote from his pocket. He clicked through a few frames before landing on a dramatically lit photo of a model draped in diamonds, staring down at the camera like royalty. "The board thinks this is what sells. I think it's cliché." "It's not just cliché," she said, stepping closer. "It's empty. This looks like every other luxury campaign out there. What happened to purpose?" "That's what I wanted you to tell them," he said, turning to face her fully. "I want you in the room this Friday when we present." I want them to hear it from the person who actually understands the soul of this direction. Tessa's brows lifted. You want me to present to your board? I do. She folded her arms. They're not going to take me seriously. I'm not even 30 and I don't wear $1,000 suits. They'll take you seriously because I'll make sure they do. He paused. And because you're the only one in this building who doesn't try to impress me. Tessa studied him for a moment. What happens if they hate it? They can hate it, he said without hesitation, but they'll hear it, and I won't let them bury it. She turned back to the campaign wall. Then we need to rewrite the narrative. This isn't about opulence, it's about identity. Orion stepped beside her. Then let's burn the script and write a new one. They spent the next 5 hours locked in the room, ordering in food they barely touched, building a pitch that challenged every expectation the Fletcher & Co. board had ever clung to. Tessa crafted the language. Orion restructured the visuals. They fought over tone, debated over message, pushed each other until the campaign finally breathed with its own heartbeat. By the time Orion walked her to the elevator, her voice was hoarse and her hair had fallen from its clip. Do you always work like this? She asked, exhausted and exhilarated all at once. No, he said, only when something's worth the effort. She pressed the call button. You're not going to suddenly change your mind and go back to the safe version, are you? Not a chance. As the doors opened, he leaned against the frame. You know, I've had people flatter me for years. Tell me what I want to hear. But not once has anyone dared to tell me I lost my way. Tessa stepped inside. Maybe because they were afraid of you. Are you? She looked at him, steady. No, the doors closed between them. The next morning, she found an envelope on her desk at Stride. Inside was an invitation, thick card stock, embossed lettering, no return address. Just a time, a location, and one line. Come as you are. When she arrived at the address later that evening, she didn't find a gala or a boardroom. She found a warehouse, lit with hundreds of suspended lights, each glowing like a firefly. In the center was a single installation, a timeline of Fletcher & Co. S. Rise, told through curated pieces, handwritten notes, and behind-the-scenes footage never before seen by the public. Orion was waiting by the entrance, no suit this time, just a dark sweater and rolled sleeves, like he'd built the entire exhibit himself. You made this for the board? She asked, stunned. I made it for you, he said. She blinked. What? I wanted to show you what the brand was before it became a machine. This is what my mother built. Before the shareholders, before the expansion. Tessa walked slowly through the timeline, reading notes penned in neat cursive, watching grainy videos of a younger Orion working beside a woman with the same intense gaze. She was brilliant, Tessa said quietly. She was everything, he replied. And I've spent the last 10 years trying to prove to myself that I deserve to inherit what she left behind. Tessa turned to face him. You don't have to prove anything. I do, he said, but not to them, to me. She stood in front of him, the lights casting a soft halo around them. Why show me this? Because you brought it back, Orion said. You reminded me why any of this ever mattered, and I don't want to forget that again. Tessa's breath caught. Orion, he took a step closer, voice low. I've never invited anyone into this part of my life, not like this. Not where it really counts. She didn't move. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm not just building this campaign with you, he said, his voice rougher now. I'm building something I didn't think I'd find again. Tessa felt her heart lurch, her pulse thudding in her ears. I don't want to confuse this, she said. This could get messy. I don't care, he said. I'll take messy over empty, every time. She didn't know who moved first, but suddenly his hands were at her jaw, his lips brushing hers, slow and certain, like he'd been waiting for permission. She kissed him back fiercely, as if the last few weeks had all been leading to this. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. You still want to present this campaign Friday? She whispered. I want to do a hell of a lot more than that, he said against her skin. But yes, we bring them this, together. And after, his answer was simple. Then we write our own story. The boardroom was full 12 directors seated in tailored lines, the air thick with expectation and tension. Tessa stood at the front, a single spotlight overhead, the campaign presentation queued up behind her. Orion sat at the end of the long glass table, silent, unreadable. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Fletcher & Co. has built its name on legacy, she began, voice steady despite the pressure curling in her chest. But legacy without relevance becomes nostalgia, and nostalgia doesn't move markets. Stories do. She clicked to the first frame, a stark image, a pair of hands calloused and elegant threading a needle through leather. Luxury isn't manufactured, it's created by people, for people. One of the directors leaned forward. And what makes you think people want that kind of campaign? The market data suggests. I've seen the data, Tessa interrupted, not flinching. I've also seen the fatigue. Consumers aren't buying products anymore, they're buying values, intent, identity. Another director cleared her throat. Are you implying Fletcher & Co. has lost its identity? I'm saying it's time to choose what kind of identity it wants to have going forward, Tessa said. You can either compete with noise or lead with meaning. She clicked again. A new frame, Orion's mother's original clutch resting on a design table, no models, no gloss. Just craftsmanship, silence stretched. Orion stood. The woman who made that, he said quietly, is the reason this company exists. We've grown tenfold since then, but we've also drifted. What Miss Zimmerman has done is remind us that luxury isn't just status, it's soul. And if we forget that, we lose everything. No one spoke for a long moment, then the chairman leaned back. You're asking us to pivot the largest campaign of the decade based on an unproven direction. I'm not asking, Orion said. I'm telling you. Tessa didn't look away. If you want to play it safe, there are 100 agencies who will give you what you expect. But if you want to lead, then this is your story. The chairman tapped his pen. We'll reconvene in 24 hours. Tessa nodded once. That's all I need. Outside, the city hummed with early evening light. She stepped onto the sidewalk, not expecting Orion to follow, but he did, his coat slung over one arm, tie gone. You didn't wait for me to speak first, he said. You didn't need to. They walked without destination, the kind of quiet that didn't weigh heavy but hummed with unspoken things. Tessa's thoughts were still half in the boardroom, half in the memory of last night's kiss. Did I tell you I hate suits? Orion asked suddenly, glancing at a couple in formal wear passing by. I only wear them because people expect me to. I assumed you lived in them. I used to, he said. But lately I've started rethinking what's actually mine and what I've just inherited out of habit. She looked at him. That sounds lonely. It was, until you. Tessa stopped walking, he turned. Too much. No, not enough. He stepped closer, quiet now. This past month. I've been more present than I've been in years. You knocked me off autopilot. She smiled, but it was soft and fleeting. And what happens when the campaign is over? He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. No velvet, just a simple matte finish, understated and clean. She opened it. Inside was a single key. To what? She asked. I bought the space next to the first Fletcher & Co. studio, he said. It's empty, but I had them gut it to the bones. I want to build something there with you. A campaign studio, a creative house. No brand names, no legacy. Just you and me making things that matter, her voice caught. Why me? You see things differently. You don't chase attention. You command it. And I want to spend the rest of my life building something with someone who makes me feel like that. Her eyes burned. Say something, he said, quieter now. She reached out, slid her hand into his. I say yes. The board approved the campaign the next morning, not unanimously, but enough. 2 weeks later, the first ad launched. It didn't open with a model. It opened with a woman's voice, Orion's mother, pulled from a decades-old interview. Her words, luxury is not about cost, it's about care. The campaign went viral in 48 hours. Critics called it a reset, a reclamation, but for Tessa, it was something else entirely. It was the start of something honest. 6 months later, she stood in the doorway of the new studio. Sunlight poured through the tall windows. The walls were bare, the floor unfinished. But the table in the center, hand-built by Orion, was already covered in early concept sketches. He walked in behind her carrying 2 coffees. "You still think I'm impossible to work with?" he asked. "You're not impossible," she teased. "You're just used to getting your way. And you're used to challenging it." She walked to the table, set down her coffee, and picked up a pencil. "Let's start the next one," she said. He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, kissed her shoulder. "No rules this time," he murmured. "No expectations either," she said. "Only creation." He paused. "And commitment." She turned in his arms. "We already have both." His voice dropped low. "Then marry me." Her breath hitched, but she didn't hesitate. "Yes." He kissed her like it was the first time, fierce and grateful and without fear. And in the quiet, in the space they built with their own hands, love wasn't just a promise. It was a foundation. Rain fell in a soft mist over the cobblestones outside the converted studio, casting golden reflections from the antique street lamps. Inside, the space buzzed with quiet purpose design boards leaned against walls. Fabric samples were pinned in curated layers, and a long cedar table bore the gentle scars of months of work. Tessa stood at the window, watching the light drizzle, arms wrapped loosely around her waist. Her pencil was still tucked behind her ear, forgotten. Orion stood behind her, sleeves pushed up, fingertips stained faintly with charcoal from sketching. He set down the prototype he'd been working on and crossed to her. "You've been staring out there for 20 minutes, he said, voice gentle but edged with curiosity. "I got an email from Stride," she said without turning around. "They offered me the creative director position." His brow lifted slightly. "That's a big offer." "I haven't answered." "Do you want it?" She hesitated, her breath fogging the glass. "I think I wanted it before this place existed, before you and I built something that felt like more than a title." Orion stepped beside her, folding his arms as he looked out at the rain. "You don't owe me staying." "I'm not staying because of you," she said, meeting his gaze. "I'm staying because of what we made. Because for the first time I don't feel like I'm proving anything to anyone. I'm just creating." He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers. "Then maybe it's time we stop waiting for the next milestone and start living the life we already built." She leaned into his shoulder, allowing herself to rest against him. "What would that look like?" "It looks like this," he said. "Mornings with too much coffee and not enough sleep. Deadlines we set for ourselves. And nights where we both forget to eat because we're chasing an idea." She laughed softly. "You make chaos sound romantic." "It is," Orion said, "because it's ours." They stayed there as the rain deepened, the silence between them not heavy but full. 2 weeks later, they held a private unveiling inside the studio. No press, no shareholders, no red carpet. Just a room full of artists, friends, and collaborators who had helped shape the new creative house they had built from scratch. The space was filled with music, laughter, and the scent of jasmine and cedar from the candles flickering along the beams. Tessa wore a navy silk jumpsuit, her hair swept into a low knot, and Orion couldn't stop watching her. Every time she turned to speak with someone, she lit up like the center of a constellation, and he felt the same pull he had the very first time she stood in front of him pitching elegance unfiltered. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the lights dimmed, he found her sitting on the edge of the table, heels kicked off, sipping champagne from a coupe glass. "You know," she said, blinking lazily, "we never actually celebrated. You mean the campaign. I mean everything, the survival, the success. Us." He took the glass from her hand and set it aside, then stepped between her knees, resting his palms on her thighs. "Then let's fix that," her arms looped around his neck. "You're not going to suggest we take a vacation, are you?" "No," he said. "I'm going to suggest we get married," she blinked. "Now, not this second," he said, "but soon, somewhere that means something. Somewhere that doesn't require a guest list or a stage." Her eyes softened. "You already know where, don't you?" He nodded. "The old studio, the one your campaign saved, the one my mother built." Tessa pressed her lips to his. "That's perfect." They married on a Saturday afternoon beneath the original Fletcher & Co. sign, refurbished and glowing. The room was simple white flowers, soft string music, and a handful of people who mattered. Tessa wore an ivory dress that fell like water around her. No veil, no diamonds. Just honesty. Orion wore no tie, and he read his vows from the back of a sketch he'd done of her laughing. "I didn't know love until you made it feel like a choice," he said, "and I promise I will choose you, every day. Even when I don't have the right words." Tessa's voice trembled, but her eyes never left his. "You gave me a place to be seen, not for what I could do, but for who I was when I wasn't trying to impress anyone. And that's the version of me I want you to have forever." They kissed before the officiant finished the last line, and no one minded. The weeks that followed were a rhythm of creation and comfort. They opened the creative house to young designers and writers who didn't have access to the industry, mentoring them, bringing their ideas to life. Fletcher & Co. flourished with its new direction, but Orion no longer let it own all of him. He learned to pass the baton, to delegate, and to come home before midnight. One evening, Tessa found him in the kitchen trying to cook something that was clearly burning. "You're not allowed near the stove without supervision," she said, leaning against the doorframe. He turned, wiping his hands with a towel. "I was trying to surprise you. You did. I didn't know smoke could be this dramatic," he laughed, stepping around the counter. "I might not be great at this part yet." "You don't have to be great," she said, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You just have to be here." "I am," he said, kissing the top of her head. "Fully." Years passed, not in a blur but in vivid color marked by new projects, quiet dinners, long walks through the city, and moments of stillness where nothing needed to be said. They traveled when they wanted to, stayed home when they didn't, and never let the world dictate what success looked like. And on the first anniversary of their wedding, Orion gave her a wrapped box with no label. Inside was the clutch his mother had made. Tessa's hands trembled as she lifted it. "You're giving this to me, I'm giving it to us," he said, "because it was the beginning of something, just like you were." She clutched it to her chest, tears brimming. "I'll protect it." "You already have," he said. "You protected the story. And you gave it a second chapter." She kissed him like she did every time she didn't have the words, and in that quiet, surrounded by the life they had built from nothing but conviction and love, there was no more chasing, only belonging.